questions for you. I know you have a meeting coming up very soon. So, how is the UK?
Yeah, good. Rainy as usual, but not too bad. Not too bad. How's it been going
Okay.
there?
Yeah, we're doing well in Nigeria. It's raining as well
Oh, okay.
in Nigeria. Yeah, it's raining and it's actually raining heavily here. Yeah.
And where are
So,
you? Lagos.
yes, I'm in Lagos at the moment, but I quite travel a lot, but my current location is Lagos at the moment.
Oh, fantastic.
So, I think you're in London right now.
Yeah, no, a little bit outside of London, but I say London just because if I say where I actually live, no one will know where it is at all.
Okay, I get that. So I just have a few questions tonight before you go off because we have students who are watching us and they just need to have a feel of what goes on the other hand. So for those who don't know, Sean Kennedy is a technical recruiter with years of experience. I think over 15 years of experience recruiting for organizations, and he has worked with top organizations like Links Recruitment, Reeds Consulting, and a host of other companies like that. So you could check out his profile, right? So we just brought him here tonight to just give the students a feel of how he works out there. So, Sean, my first question would be, I understand you're a recruiter and you have filled up thousands of roles. So how do companies actually fill up roles for tech jobs? What is the process? How does it work? I mean, for software testing, for cloud, for Scrum Master, when an organization needs to fill up these technical roles, what is the process like? We need to understand. Yeah, over to you. Yeah.
Well, so it's an interesting question. Every company will do it ever so slightly different, but the main basis is it will be off a scope of work. So let's say, for example, your company is focused on building a product. That product will have certain components to get it to sell, to get it to where it needs to be. So to get to that point, the hiring managers, let's say, for example, we're talking about engineering here, an engineering manager will say, to get from A to B, I need X, Y, and Z, whether that's a software tester, data engineer, machine learning engineer, whoever within that role. They will then approach the HR team and your chief operating officer and say, I need this. Is this attainable? Is this something I can do? Can I hire this person? And then it will then trickle down to the TA team to be able to say, okay, we have approval. We have this ready to this scope of work. And you'll get a certain level of priority. So let's say, for example, your product is close to finish and you need a QA tester. That then really becomes a high priority role. So anything other than that, you can do like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 1 being specifically important, tier 2 being, important but not the end of the world, tier 3 like hire when you make a good hire. So it will then trickle down to TA, and then TA will then go out. So talent acquisition will then go out and then source that relevant person for that role. There's a lot of red tape in hiring, which I think gets sometimes looked over. So like sometimes it will be like your hiring manager will say, I want 10 people, but realistically, do they need 10 people? Is it achievable for the business? Can the business afford it? And what would you even do with 10 people? So there's a lot that comes out of
that. Interesting. Okay, so let's now get to something that relates a lot with the students. So when recruiters, they post these job adverts on Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Monster, and the rest of them. So people, submit their CVs, and at times LinkedIn. I know recruiters come on LinkedIn and they try to reach out. But what do recruiters actually look for in CVs that makes them to like, oh, let's call this guy for an interview? Because I believe tonight I'll show the students some jobs on LinkedIn that came out in the last 24 hours. And I've seen a lot of applicants have applied to the jobs. So you are the recruiter and you posted a job and a lot of CVs have come flying in, right? For a Q&A role, a Scrum Master role. And so what what is the criteria you will use to just throw some CVs into the dustbin and say, okay, and you come for the interview?
Yeah, good question. So I think the first thing people are looking at is your experience and what compatibility that has to the role. So as a recruiter, we'll go away and speak to our hiring managers and say, what do you want? What do you need? What am I looking for? What does good look like? And they'll give you a number of factors, and they'll say this is the best. This is like the all-star. I need a Python engineer, who knows Django as well, who knows all these specific aspects. So I'll have, let's say, for example, I have a list of 5 things. I'm looking for those 5 things on a CV. Now, I'm also looking for details of what they've done. So I'm looking for skills in the last 3 roles, let's say. So I think that's a good estimate in your last 3 roles, especially if you're like a contractor. Your last 3 roles, what you've done and the skills that went into them, and a little bit as well around the type of environment you've worked in as well. So I know that if I work for Agile Consulting, and I work there, I want someone who's worked probably in a consulting area before. And that for me is important because they know the industry, they know how this kind of stuff works. And that's what I particularly look for. And that's what most recruiters will look for. Skill, where you've worked and what you've done, specifically to their role. So if you're ever applying to a role, the best thing I would recommend is, it does take a little bit longer, but this is the best way you can get into a role is tailor your CV to the job spec. You've done that job, you're applying for a reason, just tailor it. You're not lying, you're not doing anything dishonest, you're tailoring to the specific needs of that company at the time so you can showcase yourself.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so here a lot of people have this idea that, now if I could summarize what you've said, the skill, the experience, skill and the experience, then your last 3 rules, that those are very important. Now, a lot of people have this belief that, certifications, I need to get these certifications, I need to get these certifications. So from the recruiter perspective, when you look at a CV and you see this guy who has shown that he has worked here and here, and he has this particular kind of skill, and you see this other guy who has acquired certification in this, certification in this, certification in this, but he doesn't have so much of experience on his CV, who will you consider first?
Probably the person, in all honesty, with the experience, because they're hands-on, they've done it. Qualifications are great, if you look at any other kind of career, let's say, for example, you look at a pilot as an example, they might have done a lot of time in a flight simulator, but they've never done actual time in the air. So employers will look at it in that kind of way. So what we're looking for is people with experience who have done it. But don't get me wrong, that's very specific to a mid-level, a senior role. But if there is a more junior role available, then yes, qualifications are fantastic because you have the basics, you have the fundamentals there to grow into a more senior role.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to also ask is, when it comes to this work reference thing, how important is it for recruiters? So for our listeners, work reference, it's a letter or an email from your previous employer attesting to the fact that you've worked with them as you claimed on your CV. So why is it that when you're trying to apply for jobs, especially in the UK, work reference is like a big thing? So why are UK jobs like that?
So it's specific to the UK. You're exactly right, because there's a big difference between agency recruitment and internal recruitment. So agency recruiters will want to get your references because that's an in for them to speak to companies that you've worked at so they can try and win their business to fill their roles. You don't have to give any references until you receive a contract. But recruiters are trying to get your references so that they can make a way in. Say you give them your previous hiring manager as a reference. They've got the email and number and the person that is doing the hiring. So they'll go and try and approach them to try and win business with them. It's sad, but it's a way agency recruitment works. An internal, we don't really ask for references until till your contract's out, because that's the only way, really, until we're doing like some companies do background checks, some do references. Like where I work, we don't do references because they can be altered. They're not as important anymore. We go off face value. It's a big thing at the moment. I think we're seeing a lot less references in the industry at the moment, rather than who did you speak to last time, or who did you work for last time? You could just give your friend. In all honesty, you could just give your mates that you worked with. And I think people are becoming more and more aware of that. So they're becoming less and less popular. The only reason they get talked about a lot with recruiters is because it'd be agency recruiters. So those who work for recruitment agencies whose main job is to win new business. So try and, if you can, avoid those questions when they ask for references. Just say, look, I'm happy to give references, but once I receive offer.
Cool. Now, so let's talk about remote jobs and jobs that are. So why do companies in UK and in Europe, right, and even US and Canada, because you have worked with a variety of recruitment companies across the world. So why do they actually put out jobs that people from anywhere, including Africa, can do, right? Why do organizations do that? So I have a couple of our students who they live in Nigeria, who actually work for companies in the UK, companies in US and in Canada, and some in Australia. So why are those companies giving out these jobs, and they don't care where you live, where you stay? Why? How did we get here?
Yeah, I think the UK specifically has quite a good talent pool, which a lot of people kind of leapfrog into, and it's a different time zone. So I'll speak from example of Canada, the company I've previously worked with. You utilize time zones as well, right? So Canada are 5 hours behind. You've got the UK, it's 5 hours ahead of them. You're basically doing the whole chasing the sun thing, where you've got people working in all time zones. So across Europe, across the UK, in different time zones. So you essentially have a workforce that's perpetually in motion and continuously working. It's a savvy move, but I think some people will do recruitment in other places if they they have an entity there. So if they have a company set up in the UK, they'll want local people to be able to maybe deal with like local issues or local kind of build hubs in certain areas. But there's no real, I guess, rhyme or reason if you don't have a company set up here. It's more of just a preference. So you're opening up a wider talent pool if you go remote. If you say you're in the middle of Alaska, in an igloo, but you can hire remotely, you can find someone anywhere, right? So why not go and put remote, and you can find someone in Nigeria, in Lagos, and you can find someone great there. Not a problem. Yeah.
Interesting. So that I get that. Now, so I want to talk about. So the CV has been sent, and the student has been called for the interview. So at the interview, what do recruiters look out for at the interviews to determine the candidates that they choose?
For recruiters, I think they're looking for a number of things. Firstly, I guess what we can assess as recruiters is soft skills. So your ability to communicate in general, your ability to communicate the points of your role and what you do. And then we'll deep dive from speaking with hiring managers into the technical stuff. So like, what does X look like to be good? And we'll ask you a question, and if you answer right, we'll have a pre-listed number of questions and answers to determine what good looks like. So it's like the first line of defense really for a hiring manager. You're looking if that person is, a culture fit. Can they fit into the organization as well? Do you see yourself working with them? Do you see other people working well with them? There's a lot of that at the moment, because soft skills at the moment, if anyone's ever heard the phrase personality hire, a lot of people are looking for the person they can work with, the person they can get along well with, sit next to in an office 8 hours 8 to 10 hours a day, go for a beer with after work. That's what people are looking for. The skill set is great, but if you think about how many people have the same skill set, how many people are the right culture fit? And that's a lot of what people are looking for as well.
So just summarizing it, so a lot of people think just getting the job is dependent on, or once I have the technical skill. But what Sean is trying to tell us is that there is the soft skill part to thing, and do you fit with the culture of the organization? And that's a learning point, because going into interview, students should not just be so much focused on the technical side of things. They should also look into soft skills. But some of these soft skills, can you just run us through? Because a situation where you have very technically sound candidates, and the choice now has to be who has better soft skills between these 2 or 3 guys. So what were some of the soft skills that recruiters look at during the interview and, oh, this guy is good, but no, this guy has this kind of soft skills?
Yeah, so communication is one of the biggest ones, and like collaboration. So in most organizations now, there'll be cross collaboration between teams. Sales will talk to engineering will talk to marketing. What we're looking for, and what most people are looking for, is someone that can communicate across different teams. So the ability to be able to speak to someone who's non-technical about technical issues or technical like areas is like gold dust. If you can go and tell marketing and sales who are non-technical about a technical issue and they understand it because of what you've told them, that's fantastic. And a lot of companies and a lot of customers will look at that and say, this is the kind of person we want, because they can collaborate and communicate with different areas of the organization. Especially when you start working with those larger organizations and like higher impact organizations, or like startups, where this stuff's really necessary.
Well, interesting. Communication, collaboration, the ability to communicate technical stuff to non-technical people. That's a good mind. Interesting. So now, Sean, you've been in this technical recruiting industry for well over 15 years, and you've worked for organizations across the world, North America and Europe. What can you say about the tech market? Will there always be opportunities and job opportunities in tech? Or are we going to get to a point whereby tech will become saturated? And depending on the answer you give, then I will ask further questions. So there's always this belief that if everybody is trying to get into tech, aren't we going to have a situation whereby, tech is just going to be saturated? And because at the moment, one of the easiest things for people to do is people are transitioning into tech and they are getting jobs. But at times I see people reach out and say, oh, are you sure this tech will not get saturated? Everybody wants to transition to tech. Yeah, people are getting jobs. So, but you've been in the industry for many years. So what can you really say? Like looking at your 15, 16 years recruiting, what's the future of tech?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something I do think about a lot, but I would say there is always going to be a number of people, and a really high number of people, that are going to be wanting to get into the tech industry. It's good. I don't think it'll ever become oversaturated, because the more people that are in tech will create more opportunities within tech. So the more tech entrepreneurs come on board who have come from tech backgrounds, the more that creates a bigger landscape for people to create more tech jobs across the industry. I'm not saying everyone will do that, but I'm saying there's enough bit I've seen over a fair few years that it keeps creating jobs. And I will say, like, people do niche down into certain areas. Tech is a really wide thing to cover, but there's always enough of the pie to go around for people in different areas, especially if you niche down to a certain area. The best advice I ever got for an engineer was, if you want to be an engineer, pick a niche, half it, niche it again, and that's your niche. And if you can niche it again. Like, it's like a continuous thing. Like, specialized will always go brand, general will always be around, but the more people that get into tech, the more opportunities there are going to be in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, like, you look at all these startups that are available at the moment.
So I have like two more questions then, so that you can have time for your class. So my second question, my first before the second is, so let's look at the computer science degree.
Mm.
So I check a lot of jobs, and some of our students who apply to these jobs, we realize that, you know, having an undergraduate degree at times is not required. There are jobs that don't even care whether you have an undergraduate degree. There are some jobs that require, but they don't care whether it's computer science or not. Where there are some jobs that, okay, so a first degree in computer science or related field. But from the perspective of the technical recruiter, does a tech background really matter in getting a tech job for a candidate who has the work experience, who has projects to back his work experience, but he didn't study computer science, he doesn't have a master's degree in tech? Do those things stand against such a candidate at the interviews and in getting the job?
It really depends on the company. Like I've worked for people who that's like a PhD in engineering has to be a must. I've worked for companies that they don't care. Like it's the honest answer. Like they
Yeah.
just don't care. Like what I think the best companies are the companies that will look at what you've done, rather than like what's written on paper, because this no one checks. But what you will check is like what they've done in the past, like few roles, are the things they've done relevant to what you're doing, and will that fit in nicely with the company? So every company's a little bit different about how they hire and what they're like, how they critique it. But I would say there's a lot of opportunity out there for sure. Like for anyone, you've just got to know where to look for it. And like, obviously, I'll do what I can to make sure I'm helping folks here. Get those opportunities set up, because there's a lot out there.
Okay. Okay. So then the final question. And for those who are watching, Sean is one of our career coaches at Agital, and tonight's session is just more of interaction. At the career coaching session, Sean actually goes more detailed. So all these things we now go more into interview, CV, revamp, LinkedIn optimization. And so it's more detailed, and it's always a 2 hours practical sessions, but tonight is just more of a chat. So my final question is, now let's talk about visa sponsorship. I know a couple of our students who have actually gotten visa sponsorship jobs, a few to UK, but a lot to countries like Estonia, Latvia, Poland, right? Those three countries, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, we've had quite a number of people who have gotten visa sponsorship jobs. And for those who are hearing or listening to me, visa sponsorship jobs are jobs you get, and the company would process the visa for you so that you can come to the country where the job is. So I want to ask, like, why do companies do visa sponsorship jobs? And are there still opportunities for that in UK and in Europe based on your knowledge of the industry?
Yeah, I think the reason some people do it is because talent is great, and there's very specific talent. Like there's great candidates available out there. Some companies will recognize that and do what they can to get you working with them. If that means sponsorship, they'll get you on board. Some companies have a policy in place for it, because companies will have to set up an internal hiring process, an internal hiring policy, to be able to grant you access to pay for your visa, to pay for like all this sponsorship stuff. There's a whole backlog of things that have to happen previously to even be in a room where you can make that happen. A company can't just decide and say, "Oh, we're going to sponsor you," because there's a lot of legalities, there's a lot of kind of paperwork into it, essentially. In the UK, I think there are some opportunities, but I think there are more opportunities, and anyone can Google this for anyone looking at any international work, is skilled worker visas. And where the highest acceptance rates have been, you can look at the countries where you're most likely to get a visa accepted for those kind of roles. And I'll say Canada is a big one. Canada's a great one for visa sponsorship. It's very easy to get a permanent residency there. A number of countries across Europe, South America, many locations where they do offer it. England's hit and miss. I think there's infrastructure to set up those kind of policies is 50-50. Some companies have it, some companies don't, sadly. I think it is you're missing out on good talent if you don't offer people sponsorship. It's essentially the business equivalent of shooting yourself in the foot. So, there are good places that do it. There are some that don't, but
yeah. So, Sean, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been a wonderful chat with you tonight. So we'll see you in the career coaching class.
Yes.
So do have a wonderful time and enjoy the rest of the day and your next class.
Right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing everyone there.
Yeah, sure. So you could just make me the host so I can continue from there.
Make host. There we go. All right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye. Yeah. All right. So that was Sean, and so we're back. If you are still with me, can I see? Right. Can I see your hands if you're still with me? So let me go back to the presentation. So I'm done with that section. Chats with Sean on technical recruiting, and we've actually answered a lot of the questions. So why tech? Why software testing and Scrum Master? Right. So I will just share this slide, and I will use this slide to explain. Even though I've said many of those things when I was showing the slides, right? So why tech? Opportunities are abundant, the laborers are few, right? There's potential for remote jobs, flexible job use, freelancing, short cuts to see. Most companies, no university degree needed for some. More than 26% of IT workers don't hold a degree. Almost 49% of IT job postings in 2017 did not list a degree as a minimum requirement for candidate. No age constraints. I always tell people about Bookie, right? Should transition to tech at the age of 44. Don't just take my word for it. Let's check out. So a lot of people at times are always like, oh, I think tech is for all these young boys. Not really, right? You're in your 30s, your late 30s, your 40s, or even late 40s, there are still opportunities for you in tech. If you're in your 50s, you can still be in tech because tech is not interested in your age, but in